Thank you, Amanda, Joe, and Rennie, and good morning and welcome to those of you who are joining us up online today. And we have someone special joining us up online this morning. 2 weeks ago, Louise Rose fell and broke her hip and her arm. Louise is kind of an overachiever for that kind of stuff. So she promised to be online this morning. So let's all say hi, Louise. Good morning, Louise. So we promised she says, it just seems awfully far to try and get to church. Really? Maybe a couple more weeks we'll let you have off. But because we've been talking about this healing journey during the month of January. And first and foremost, I think if there's anything, and in myself too, because we all struggle with this. My humanness wants to be healed. It wants to be healed yesterday and be done with it. Whatever it may be, whether it's as simple as a cold or as it's more difficult, as Louise is struggling with, the repair of the body through surgical process. Whatever it might be, we want to just, come on, let's go on, let's get over it. Surely it can't be that bad or that difficult. And to remind ourselves that healing is not simplistically a human physiological event. That there is a wholeness and a holiness and a spiritual aspect to our healing journey. And that they are not, this is my physical journey and this is my spiritual journey over here. It's an incorporation and to celebrate and to honor and sometimes to struggle with. I think for myself personally, it's like, where are you, God? I'm not feeling good. And I'm not going to be mambly-pambling around about it. I don't feel good, and I just don't think you're loving me or anything. And we feel that very strongly. But you know what also is interesting? When we have success in our life, we tend to go, hey, God, don't worry about me. Everything's okay. Go help somebody else today. So we also disconnect from our human experience as being a God-unified experience by when we are successful because we think, well, we don't need God now. But on the other hand, we say, oh, I really need God when I'm sick. Where are you? And God's like, excuse me, but I've been here the whole time. It's our integration and our understanding and our awareness that God is intimately, think of that word. God is intimately in every cell and fiber of your being. God is below and beyond what science today even tells us is the makeup and the component structures of our chemical composition we call a body. How fascinating. So when we talk about healing, we can't just talk about, well, take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning kind of thing. We also have to talk about how we interweave our experience of God and that sense that when we have a healing journey, it's always a call and an invitation to greater discovery and exploration. Segue to last Sunday. Those of you who are not here, you're going to have to go to our YouTube channel, Tulsa Unity Jamestown, to get the full story. But what happened last week, unbeknownst to me, out of the clear blue sky, is a book that I had lost 50 years ago, has come back into my experience. The unfortunate part about the book is that the Pony Express only delivered once last week in Tulsa, and I don't have the book in my hand. So we'll have to kind of segue to the book a little bit later. But it was a book, let me give you the shortened version, on the sinking of the Titanic that my grandfather gave me some years ago when I was a teenager, and the book was published in 1912, about 6 months after the Titanic went down. And the woman through Facebook we found each other is in the process of sending it to me. So I'm, of course, very eager to get it. But I thought, wow, how interesting. This is just part of the puzzle. It's part of the puzzle. Because it wasn't about the book, and I want you to hear that. Last Sunday's talk was about the invitation to come to the understanding that we know really nothing about God. the great mystery, the magnitude. What are the chances? Almost 50 years, probably 45, 47 years passed since I have seen that book. I don't remember where I lost it, but the chances are, in a very really good chance, that it is in fact the book that I lost so long ago. How is that possible? How is that possible that it would find its way after all these years back into my experience? Even just looking at a picture of it just made my heart sing. What little we know about the connections of the universe. What little do we know about the cosmic movement and flow. When we start talking about healing and our spiritual human dance, how little we know about the dynamics and the intricacies of that dance. And this has just brought it up to me in such a very, very powerful way. We talked last Sunday on Paul's passage, excuse me, found in Romans chapter 8. All things work together for good. Why was I on Facebook Saturday night at 5 o'clock? Why did I answer my friend, whose friend answered my friend, who said, I know what you're talking about. Why? It all worked together. And why, after years of looking for something? Why then? 4 days before my birthday. Why then? I don't, when you allow yourself to quit saying, why, and say, wow, what does this tell me? What does this tell me about a mystery that I bear, that I think I pray, I meditate, I know about God. No, I don't. How do I know how my life is going to unfold? How do you know how your life is going to unfold? Who is waiting outside the door to intersect with your life today that will change it forever? Think of the people that you met just here in this room over the course of time. Think of the people that, you've intersected with, you were high school friends or whatever it might be. And somehow, in this great cosmic soup, you come back together again and you have new experiences, a new life built on the foundation of what you've already had. And yet, something new unfolds. How magnificent. It all works together for good. And what we struggle with, though, and I think especially back to the issue of healing, is we struggle a lot when it affects our human body. When it affects our human body, don't you kind of feel like all bets are off? Because I don't want to be sick, or I don't want to hurt, or I don't want to feel uncertain. I want to just be okay. And yet we all know that the journey of the body is a small piece of a great, great spectrum of life eternal. So this idea that all things work together for good played with me all week long as I kept looking out the door, waiting for the book to come. She told me she had sent it, but, it's like, well, it didn't get here and didn't get here. And then that little quote, another good Paul quote, came to me. In the fullness of God's time. This is a quote that Paul, or a phrase I should say, that Paul uses. He used it in the book of Romans, he used it in the book of Ephesians, and he used it in the book of Philippians. And there's something about this phrase means a lot to Paul, because the idea of fullness of time, what he's saying is there's a completeness about it. There's some sort of completeness that happens. And I thought, how interesting that this book will arrive in the fullness of God's time. This healing will happen in the fullness of God's time. This revelation will happen in the fullness of God's time. But you know what I thought? I think the word time misleads us. I'm going to rewrite the Bible. And I think the translation should be in the fullness of God's grace. Because you see what happens when we connect that word time in there. You and I, we are time-bound beings. We understand 11:10 in the morning. We understand when it's noon, and it has ramifications, right? We say, oh, it's noon, it must be time for lunch. It's 6, it must be time for dinner. Whatever it might be, we have an idea of what time it is. And here's another example. Speaking of healing, the doctor says, okay, well, you're going to be in this cast for 6 weeks. And you say, okay, my God, it's 6 weeks. And you're marking off the calendar, 5 weeks, 6.5 days. Man, you just can't stand it until tomorrow. And they say, you know, no, I think you need to wait another 3 weeks. Are you kidding me? I've waited 6 weeks, just like you told me. And we just cannot absorb that the body says, slow down, sister, it's going to take a little longer. And then to step back and say, in the fullness of God's time, well, I waited 6 weeks. How much time does God need? You see, and I think that's where time kind of gets in the way. But if I say to myself, in the fullness of God's grace, then I can't put a definer on it. I can't put something on it that makes an end note so that I can say, well, it should have happened right here. It didn't happen, and therefore God isn't healing me or God isn't taking care of me. No, in the fullness of God's grace. You know, sometimes you can heal faster. Sometimes you can heal slower. Sometimes it never heals. Sometimes it is the release of the body. But it is the fullness of God's grace, because this human form that you and I share, this life that we are privileged to live in, this biochemical thing we call a body, is also the manifestation of the flow of the eternal life from which we have come. The fullness of God's grace then allows it to unfold. Did you ever notice that a lot of times in the Bible, in many spiritual writings, the word is never time, it's unfold? I think about that, and I think to myself, you know, as we're just about getting ready to unfold the flowers of spring, that they're all going to unfold in their own way. In their own time. The daffodils are not saying, okay, we are not going to unfold until the tulips are up. This year we're doing it differently. Tulips first, we're second. No, the daffodils, no, it's already time. We're going to unfold in the fullness of our time, in the fullness of grace. And some of that unfolding will be that plants that don't. Some of them will be plants that flower beautifully. But whatever they do, they will give it their all. This is everything I have. This is what I was born to be. See, we constantly go back and forth about what is our purpose in life. Your purpose is to simply allow the unfolding of that spiritual life within this human body. It's about letting that love come forth in its own unique way, in your own unique manifestation. How is it that this great unfolding happens? And how is it that we encounter love so immense and so grand that regardless of what we've done or what we've failed to do, what we think we are or what we don't think we are, love so loved itself, it continues to love us constantly, incessantly, intimately, all the time, with a love far greater than we can understand. So it's our piece to the puzzle. If God is always loving us, if God is always with us, then we've got something to do here on this side to become aware of it. We've learned we have a body, but we haven't learned that the body and the spirit are the same. We have learned about how life is on planet Earth at this time, but we haven't learned that this is a spiritual experience we're living into. How is it that we have a piece to the puzzle that needs to be fulfilled also? The other day, I was watching a YouTube clip from Simon, I believe you pronounce his last name Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. And he was doing an interview about relationships. And I thought it was very interesting. I particularly like Simon. And he said to the gentleman sitting there, he said, "What day did you fall in love with your wife?" And the guy said, "Well, our first date was," he said, "No, that's not the question. The question is, what day did you fall in love?" Now the guy's kind of fidgeting. He's getting a little embarrassed that he can't figure out. He's thinking, oh, my wife was watching and I can't answer this question, right? And finally Simon says, "Listen, there is no answer to that question." And the guy said, "What do you mean?" He said, "No one falls in love on a day and a time. It is an accumulation. It is a building of a relationship." He says, let's face it, what happens to the vast majority of us, is two people who've never met each other meet. And for whatever reason, we kind of connect. Maybe we're going to join the Super Bowl game next week. We're both 49er fans, and we're ready for the game, and we're going to go to a friend's house. And we meet, and we connect, and we share common things. We share maybe common friends. And all of a sudden, we just start having some experiences. We are building sort of what we might want to call a relationship soup. We're putting things in. And it's cooking, and it's cooking, and it's cooking. And over the course of time, however long or short that time may be, there's sort of an unfolding. We're back to this unfolding again. We can't hurry a good, mature relationship. It has to unfold through life experiences. And he said, and then one day what happens is you've been talking to your loved one on a phone, and you hang up the phone and you say to yourself, wow, I really love her. It's not a date and a time. It is an accumulation. And he said, so often people come to me and they want to know what to do to shore up their relationship, or how do they fix their relationship. They want to take the spouse on a trip or buy them expensive things, and they say, that'll never do it. That's nice, but you've got to put into the soup with intentionality. He said, I'll tell you how to make a better relationship. Put the cap on the toothpaste and make the coffee and take out the trash every single day. He said, because when you sacrifice a moment of your time to do something for your significant other, you communicate, you are important to me. You're more important than my time and my energy. So when I do that, the reception is, you see, they'll do that for me. If I say, honey, would you go down to Home Depot? And I think, oh, Home Depot, oh my God, any place but Home Depot. And I get a list and I go, okay. Because I want to do that. I want to reach out of myself and my time and my agendas and my energy and do that for you because you've asked, or because I knew you needed help. Now let's segue that to God. When do we say we love God? It's even kind of a weird phrase, isn't it? Oh, I love God. In the traditional church, it oftentimes sounds like it's when I was baptized, or maybe when I gave my life to Christ. That would be kind of that sign of that idea. But that's the same as the marriage vows. You don't love God in that moment. You love God on the day you don't feel like praying, on the day you feel sick and say, I don't really see how God's working together for good. I don't see the fullness of grace, but I believe and I trust that it is. And one day I will see. And I would keep meditating and journaling and praying, or whatever it might be, the disciplines that add up little by little by little. And then one day I just know that I love God. I just see, I just feel, I just begin to experience what it is to love God. And it's momentary and fleeting, just like our own relationships. You can't say, aha, now that I know that I love that person, I'm done. Now the stakes go up a little bit higher. So what about our health? We've talked about it as being a spiritual experience, and I know this is some of what Rennie will talk about a little bit later in Tea and Conversations. What is the discipline of health? It's mental, seeing yourself as healthy. It's emotional, maybe forgiveness and surrender and grief work. Maybe it is changing your diet. Maybe it is exercise, and maybe it's a little bit of every single bit of it, that you put it into the great soup. And then one day you experience health, not necessarily or simplistically as your body feeling better, but an overall encompassing realization of life moving through you. So, as we kind of end our journey about health this month, I think we're all challenged, and I'm speaking to myself particularly. I'm very challenged with this ongoing respiratory thing, which, yes, I have been checked for the China virus, and it is not that, because there was concern that it was that, that I can move through it, and it's I don't even know how to express it. It's like I get so clearly that it is the invitation to see something more. But it is something that I don't really get right now because I don't feel good right now. And I anchor the two together, don't you? When I feel good, then I'll see it. Okay? When I feel good, then I get God. And can I say, I get God right now? Can I say, I get life right now? Can I wait for this book to the fullness of God's grace, just as I wait as patiently for the healing of my body, for the healing of my heart, for the healing of my soul? That it's somehow all of this is working together in all of our lives, individually and collectively. Moment by moment, step by step, day by day, we're building something different, unique, and special. It is that relationship with ourselves and our spiritual journey. It is the relationship with others, and it is the relationship with life and Almighty God that is an unending song that sings itself through our physical awareness out into the world. Thank you for joining me today, and God bless.